The dim light of the editing suite was thick with the kind of silence that only exists a moment before an explosion. On the massive monitor, the final frame held still. The screen displayed the face of a woman staring at a closed door, while in the bottom corner, a soft neon blue audio wave pulsed gently. Andrew, the producer, held his breath, then slapped Max on the back with all his might. Max. This is a masterpiece. Millions of views guaranteed. You've outdone yourself again. The visual imagery, the raw emotion, that psychological undercurrent. Tomorrow, every digital platform will be talking about this. The team around them erupted into applause. Someone popped a bottle of champagne, the clinking of glasses and laughter filled the room. Everyone was congratulating the director, the content creator whose name had become synonymous with deep, gripping visual storytelling. Max sat in his chair, motionless. He stared at the rendering progress bar that had just hit 100%, and felt absolutely nothing. No joy, no relief from finishing a project that had consumed the last 6 months of his life. Just a dull, throbbing ache in his temples and a total, absolute darkness inside. He created stories about human emotions, extracted raw feelings from actors, and twisted psychological plots so tightly that audiences wept in front of their screens. Yet, for months now, he had felt like an empty glass shell. His internal battery was burnt to ash. Professional burnout had mutated into a chronic numbness of the soul. That same evening, without waiting for the after-party in his honor to finish, Max slipped out the back door. He turned off his phone and tossed it into the glove compartment. A backpack with a few t-shirts, his laptop, and an old film camera that once belonged to his grandfather flew onto the back seat. Max got behind the wheel and drove away from the neon-choked metropolis. He was guided by sheer muscle memory, heading to a place where there were no deadlines, no trends, and no algorithms. A small provincial town by the river, where he had spent his childhood, and where his parents' house had stood empty for 5 years. The car pulled up to the weathered wooden fence just as a thick, milky morning fog was rising over the river. The town greeted Max with a silence so profound that, at first, his ears popped. The distant roar of highways didn't reach this place. The house welcomed him with the smell of dust, dry grass, and old wood. Max walked through the rooms. Everything remained exactly as it had been 15 years ago. His first childhood drawing still hung on the wall, a crooked fortress he had built with his mother. On the shelves, books gathered dust. Sartre, Camus, texts on analytical psychology. Once, in his youth, he had read them cover to cover, trying to understand how the world and the human psyche worked. Back then, he had plenty of questions. Now, he had plenty of answers, but none of them kept him warm. He brewed a cup of strong black coffee, stepped out onto the porch, and tried to simply look at the river. But his brain, warped by years of work, instantly flipped into professional mode. Okay, the angle of the light is about 45 degrees. The fog gives a beautiful diffusion. If I were shooting this, I'd need an anamorphic lens. Max closed his eyes and almost smashed his cup against the floor. God, just stop, he whispered to himself. The digitization of reality had become his curse. He could no longer just live a moment, he automatically tried to capture it, package it into content, and sell it to an audience. At that moment, the old gate creaked. Walking through the garden toward the porch was a girl in a simple, light-colored sweater, carrying a large woven basket full of apples. Seeing the car in the yard, she paused, then smiled warmly. "Oh, we have a guest," she said, approaching the steps. "You must be Max. Your father talked about you a lot before he moved to the capital. He said his son shoots films about human souls." Max exhaled heavily, looking at her simple face, completely free of heavy makeup or media polish. "I used to. Right now, I'm just trying to remember what it's like to have a soul of my own. I'm Anna, the neighbor," she set the basket on the table. "I take care of the garden while no one's here. Your dad always let me pick the apples. Want one? They're real. Not from a supermarket." Max took an apple. It was cool, smelling of rain and earth. He took a bite, and suddenly, that simple flavor made his throat tighten with an unexpected, heavy wave of nostalgia. The next few days turned into a strange ritual. Max kept his phone off. For the first 48 hours, he went through literal withdrawal. His hand would automatically reach for his pocket, his brain demanding to check analytics, read comments, or see what his competitors had posted. It was a brutal digital detox. Anna came by almost every day. She knew nothing about his status, his multi-million-dollar contracts, or his awards. To her, he was just Max, the son of the old professor, a guy with sad eyes who smoked too much on the porch. One evening, they sat on the riverbank. The sun was setting slowly, painting the water in deep shades of amber. Max held his grandfather's camera, turning the focus ring, but he never once pressed the shutter button. "Why don't you take the picture?" Anna asked, wrapping her arms around her knees. "I'm afraid," Max answered honestly. "If I take the shot, this evening stops belonging to me. It becomes material. I built my whole career on peeking at life through a lens. Psychology calls it a defense mechanism. When you're the director or the cameraman, you control the situation. You're safe. You can't get hurt because you're on the other side of the glass. But the price of that safety is total isolation. You stop being a participant. You think too much, director," Anna said softly. "You're trying to dissect life like a frog in a lab. Looking for hidden meanings and philosophy where you should just feel. Look at that sun. It doesn't have a hidden agenda. It just warms you up. You don't need to edit it." She gently took the heavy camera from his hands and set it down on the grass. Then, she took his hand in hers. Her palm was warm and slightly rough. And in that moment, for the first time in years, something cracked open inside Max. It felt like a ray of spring sunshine piercing through a frozen windowpane. His heart beat faster, not from coffee or the adrenaline of a deadline, but from simple, human warmth. A week later, Max finally brought himself to sort through the clutter in his father's study. Among old lecture notes and textbooks, he stumbled upon an old tin box tied with a thick string. Inside lay old 8mm film reels and his father's diary. Max opened the diary to a random page, dated to a year when he was only 7 years old. "Today Max asked me why people cry when they are happy. I didn't know how to answer without making it too complicated. He sees the world with such amazing clarity. He notices details that we adults have long blurred out with routine. I only fear one thing. That his gift for seeing beauty might become a heavy cross for him. I hope when he grows up, he will make films not to prove something to the world, but simply to share his love for it." Max buried his face in his hands. The tears he had held back for years, the ones he had spent a lifetime suppressing as a sign of weakness, finally broke through. They flowed past his fingers, washing away the glossy, artificial armor of the successful creator. He remembered why he had picked up a camera in childhood in the first place. Not for the views. Not for the money or the validation of critics. But because he was utterly fascinated by this world. He realized exactly where he had taken the wrong turn. He had allowed algorithms and other people's expectations to replace his own heart. A month passed. Back in the metropolis, Andrew was practically tearing his hair out, burning through every possible contact, when an email from Max finally landed in his inbox. No explanations, just a single video link and a short note. "Show this to people. No ads. Just upload it." It was a 3-minute video clip, shot on an old lens. There were no special effects, no complex neon lighting, no twisted psychological thriller plotlines. Instead, there was the morning fog over the river. An old man holding his grandson's hand. A loaf of bread being broken in half. And Anna, laughing, squinting against the sun as she chased a dog through the meadow. There was so much air, love, and raw, unadulterated life in every frame that the viewer could practically smell the grass. The video was titled simply, "The First Take." There were no corporate sponsors or logos in the corner of the screen. Just a closing title card. To see what matters most, sometimes you just have to turn off the camera. Max stood on the porch of his childhood home. The phone lay on the table, he had only turned it on to send the file. The screen lit up endlessly with hundreds of notifications and incoming calls, but Max didn't even look at it. He walked over to Anna, who was sitting on the steps. "Well, great director, what are we shooting next?" she asked with a smile. Max sat down beside her, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and looked at the sunset, which seemed exceptionally beautiful today. "Nothing," he answered quietly, at peace. "Today, I'm just going to watch."